Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Tigers Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Schulte. It is Tuesday, November 1st, 2022, at the time of the recording of this. And we are covering a few things. Again, the episodes aren't going to be as fast and furious because obviously there's no games to cover unless you're an Astros or a Phillies fan, and I'm not, so we won't. Although, there are a few things that have gone on around baseball. Some firings, some hirings, some retirements that are worth mentioning in a sense. But the main hirings and firings that we're concerned about have gone on in the Tigers front office. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go ahead and cover what's been going on. Now, Detroit has claimed a couple of players off of waivers. They're minor leaguers. They're depth pieces. They're not anything worth writing home about. The big deal was them designating Drew Hutchison for assignment again. Now, I get the reason that they did this because they wanted to give him, look, I think it's the right move, but I don't like it. And here's why. I don't like it because basically what you're telling a guy who, for all intents and purposes, led your team in healthy starts. And what I mean by that is Tarik Skubal had more innings than Drew Hutchison did, but Drew Hutchison was healthy all year long. Whereas Tarik Skubal, he couldn't help the fact that he had to have flexor tendon surgery. I get that. But he did end up having to go and have flexor tendon surgery, and that was an issue. So, what we're going to discuss today is the reasoning behind that decision, what that move means for the Tigers' starting rotation, and what's going on in the front office. So let's go ahead and get into the reason behind the decision. So what they did is the season ended on October 5th. On October 6th, they DFA'd Drew Hutchison. Now the reason behind that is free agency doesn't technically start until the World Series ends. If the World Series goes 7 games, it won't end until the 5th or the 6th of November, if it goes 7 games. So what this does is it gives him an opportunity to go out there and find a team, explore his options, possibly pick up a minor league deal. It's more fair to him than it is for them to non-tender him or to release him outright when free agency starts. Because they DFA'd him. If nobody had claimed him off of waivers in 5 days, he'd gotten his outright release, and it would allow him to move on and do what he needed to do to catch on with another team, possibly. Does that mean he will? You never know. He pitched pretty well for the Tigers. He wasn't lights out, but he was solid, and he was reliable. You could count on Drew Hutchison to give you 5 innings every 5th day. And in today's game, that's saying something. Would they be quality innings? No, there might be times where he gives up 4 runs and he gives up a lot of hard contact, and he walks a few batters. But then there might be times when he only gives up 1 run and he strikes out a few and doesn't give up any hard contact, and then he gives you 6 or 7 innings instead of just 5. So there's all sorts of possibilities here for what the Tigers are doing. And based on the Tigers' rotation right now, the possibility is very strong that he comes back next year. He might come back on a minor league deal, but if he does, there's a very distinct possibility that he could be fighting for a starting spot in training camp and actually catch on with the big club. So there is the distinct possibility that he could fight for a spot in spring training and catch on with the big club. because of the way the Tigers rotation looks. Let's give you a rundown of who is in the starting rotation right now, who is locked in, will be on the 40-man roster on opening day, will be on the 26-man roster on opening day, making the trip to Tampa. Eduardo Rodriguez, Matt Manning, Tyler Alexander. I'll go through those names again. Eduardo Rodriguez, Matt Manning, Tyler Alexander. Joey Wentz is in the mix. Spencer Turnbull is in the mix. We don't know when Casey Mize is going to come back, even if he does come back in next year. We don't know what Scott Harris is going to do as far as free agent signings in the offseason or trades. We don't know what Spencer Turnbull is going to look like after being off for a year plus with Tommy John. We don't know how Alex Faedo is going to look. We don't know what Garrett Hill's going to look like. Joey Wentz right now is pitching like a beast in the Arizona Fall League. Last I checked, he had pitched 12 scoreless innings in the Arizona Fall League, and that's not easy to do because those are minor league stadiums, and the lighting isn't good. The conditions for defense aren't very good. I mean, it's basically they're playing at spring training ballparks, and you know what spring training looks like in Arizona. So to go 12 innings and have a 0.00 ERA, yeah, that's saying something. And if you think that Garrett Hill, when he was pitching in the AFL last year, that it didn't help him when he came up to the big leagues, that it didn't help him progress to the big leagues, you're on something, and it's not very good. So these are things that Scott Harris is going to have to deal with. And again, Drew Hutchison likes pitching with the Tigers. He's from Lakeland, so if he does sign up with the team, then he can pretty much stay at home for spring training. He doesn't have to deal with finding a place to, another house or anything like that. Those things mean things. Zach Greinke was in the mix to come to the Tigers. The only reason that he ended up going back to Kansas City is because his house is 30 minutes away from the spring training complex in Arizona. And that meant something to him. So that's a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's not going to move the meter a lot in what the Tigers do this offseason. But it's something, and it actually says to me how this team thinks, and it says that they haven't changed their mindset to the point where they make jerk moves because it's better for the pocketbook or whatever. Because they could hold on to Drew Hutchison and make him a qualifying offer, and then if somebody else signs him, they get compensation in some way. At least I think that's how they still do it. I don't know if the new CBA got rid of that or not. But they didn't choose to do that. They went ahead and just DFA'd him and said, okay, go ahead. Happy trails. Now look, does Drew Hutchison fit what needs to be done in Detroit as far as dominating the strike zone on both sides of the ball? No, he does not. And that may have something to do with why he got DFA'd as well. Because let's face it, his walks were higher than his strikeouts. If they weren't higher, they were pretty close to even. And that's not a good way to live, especially when you have the stuff that Drew Hutchison has, or doesn't have, as the case may be. Now, onward. In the front office. Oh, boy. The pink slips have abounded in the front office. David Chadd, gone. Scott Place, gone. Quite a few other guys. Kevin Rand, gone. Doug Teeter, reassigned. new faces in Mark Connor and Rob Metzler. So Detroit hires Rob Metzler from the Tampa Bay Rays. He was their director of scouting. He is now a director of scouting and international operations. It's an upward move for him. They also hired Mark Connor as their director of amateur scouting. So those two guys will oversee the draft. Now, they have not named a new GM yet, which kind of makes me wonder if Scott Harris has somebody specific in mind. Now, David Stearns has left Milwaukee. He's not there anymore. He's gone. I don't think Dayton Moore is in Kansas City anymore, because I was looking at they hired Matt Cacciaro as their manager. And when they did that, there was a different name for their GM. So Dayton Moore wasn't there. What I'm wondering is, I don't see anybody from the Philadelphia front office coming in. I really don't. I think Dave Dombrowski will probably hire Scott Place and David Chad. Or possibly Alavila again. Because let's not forget, those guys were there as part of the Dave Dombrowski regime. And the Tigers are trying to get as far away from that now as they can. So what you're probably going to see, what I'm wondering if you're going to see, is Pete Pudula is an assistant GM with the Houston Astros. And his name was bandied about when the Tigers were looking for a GM. So what I'm wondering is if Pete Pudula is going to be the GM and Scott Harris is going to be the president. Pete Pudula is the vice president and general manager, and he reports directly to Scott Harris. Now, I don't know if they can't hire these guys during the during the playoffs, and that's why he hasn't been named yet. Or maybe Scott Harris just hasn't found anybody that checks all the boxes. You know, certainly Sam Menson is doing a decent job, according to all sources. Jay Sartori is doing a decent job, according to all sources. But oddly enough, they had the opportunity to hire one of those guys, to promote one of those guys, and they didn't do it. So, and Scott Harris could still do that, but if he was going to do it, you'd think he would have done it by now. He wouldn't have brought in Rob Metzler and Mark Connor and the guys that he brought in if he was going to wait and make an internal hire for general manager. I just don't see that happening. We'll find out more after the general manager meetings. I have a feeling that that's where if there is going to be a new hire made, that will be when it happens. What do we have coming up in the off season? A few things. The winter meetings, the GM meetings, the Rule 5 draft, and the non-tender deadline. Now, I believe the non-tender deadline is December 1st. That is a Thursday. Last year it was 8 p.m. December 1st. We'll see, 8 p.m. November 30th. We'll see where that goes because, you know, there's a lot of people that are out there. Jeimer Candelario, are they going to give him a new contract, offer him a new contract? You know, and of course, anything that happens with the Tigers between then and now we'll cover if it's of any importance. If they trade Gregory Soto, I'll do a podcast. If they sign, I don't know, If they re-sign Tucker Barnhart, I'm not going to make it a big deal. I'll be surprised if they re-sign Tucker Barnhart, but you never know. So, and that's a whole different podcast in and of itself. Who's going to be the catcher for the Tigers? Who's going to be in their starting rotation? We'll get into that. Before spring training starts. Big news if you are listening to the podcast via Anchor through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Stitcher or whatever, and you've tried to get a hold of us on the YouTube channel, but you can't find us. You can now do it by going to youtube.com/@TB podcast. That's all one word, @TB podcast. So you go to youtube.com, you can either type that into the search field on YouTube or just go to youtube.com/@TB podcast. And that will give you the channel. And there's where you can like and subscribe and make comments and tell me I'm an idiot and do all the things. So yeah, that's a thing. And you can definitely check that out. The more subscribers we get to YouTube, the more fun we'll have. I'm hoping next year to have a better photo. I use a service called Tunes to Tube, which is an audio uploader, and then it puts a still image on your YouTube video so that YouTube doesn't sit there and go, there's no video here, it's only audio, it needs to go away. There are watermarks in the photos that it's putting up right now because I'm using a free account. Hopefully by the end of spring training, I'll be able to actually pay for a 6-month subscription, which will go right through the regular season. So that'll be a thing. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can. Email tigersbaseballpodcast@gmail.com, @podcasttigers on Twitter. Like, subscribe, rate, and review. Subscribe to us at youtube.com/@TB podcast. Until next time, folks, I'm Chris Schulte. We'll see you later. Go Tigers.